The paperwork from Spa says one thing, the people involved say another, and the gap between those two versions came out less than a day after the checkered flag. You have probably seen the headline, Hamilton, 5-second penalty, lap 1, Russell in the gravel. What you probably have not seen is what the stewards wrote down, what the man they punished actually did in that corner, and what the one person with the most reason to be angry, George Russell himself, said when a microphone reached him. In this video, you will understand why Fred Vasseur is not letting this one go, and by the end, I want your answer to one question. Does this change your read on what happened, or did you already assume it? So, follow the chain, because the timeline is the story here. Saturday afternoon at Spa, Hamilton crashes heavily in final practice. His Ferrari mechanics rebuild the rear right corner under park firm conditions, which limits what they can legally touch, and he still qualifies 6th, one place behind Leclerc. Sunday, lights out. Down the Kemmel Straight, Russell's Mercedes hits an electrical deployment problem in the first sector, loses drive at the worst possible moment, and both Ferraris swallow him on the run up the hill. Russell does not accept it. He hangs on around the outside into Les Combes, brakes very late, and puts his car alongside. Hamilton holds the inside line. The Ferrari understeers, Hamilton winds on corrective lock, and his front left wheel touches the right side of the Mercedes. Russell spins, beaches in the gravel, and his race is over on the opening lap. Hamilton drives on. The stewards investigate. The penalty comes back. 5 seconds, served standing still in the pit box during his stop. He crosses the line 4th, 6 seconds away from the podium. Then the timeline moves. Hours later, Ferrari's team principal is in front of the written media, and his first reaction is not diplomatic. And on top of everything, a second investigation opens against Hamilton for an unsafe release from that same pit stop, because a mechanic was caught by the front right tire. Before we open the rest of this file, do 2 things. Hit subscribe, because this story has a second half sitting inside a steward's bulletin. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from, because how this penalty reads depends a lot on which driver your country grew up defending. Now, the voice that anchors all of this. Fred Vasseur is not a pundit filling airtime. He runs Scuderia Ferrari. He signs off on the strategy, he answers to Maranello for every point lost, and when he criticizes the governing body stewards on the record, there's a political cost attached to every word. He knows that. He said it anyway. Speaking to motorsport.com after the race, Vasseur called the penalty mega harsh. His argument was specific. Look at the corner. Russell had room on the left. He was not against the wall. And for Vasseur, this was a racing incident that cost his team a lot. Speaking to Planet F1 and other accredited media, he went further, and this is the sentence to keep in mind because it comes back. He pointed out that every lap 1 incident so far this season had been treated as a racing incident, then added that it is not him making the decision, but it seems tough. Read that twice. A team principal does not remind the world who makes the decisions unless he wants you thinking about who makes the decisions. Now put the official version on the table and ask it some questions. Did Russell have an overlap into the corner? Yes. The stewards wrote that car 63 had established enough overlap to be entitled to racing room. Was Hamilton in full control of the car at the moment of contact? No. The document itself records that car 44 experienced understeer and applied corrective steering. That is not an opinion from the Ferrari garage. That is the steward's own account. Did Hamilton deliberately squeeze him? Nothing in the reasoning says so. The wording, as reported by Planet F1, is that the collision came from car 44 being unable to maintain sufficient separation. Unable, not unwilling. Did they consider that? They did. And here is the part that matters most. The standard penalty for causing a collision is 10 seconds. The stewards cut it to 5 because of mitigating circumstances, which means the panel itself accepted that Hamilton had little room to avoid the contact, wrote that down in an official document and penalized him anyway. Half punishment, full guilt. Hold that thought. Here is where it turns, because there are 2 versions of this incident, and they came out in a very specific order. Version 1, Sunday afternoon, published by the stewards, Hamilton at fault, entitled Racing Room Denied, 5 seconds. Version 2, Sunday evening, delivered on camera by the man who ended up in the gravel. George Russell, whose race lasted 1 lap, whose championship took the hit, called it a racing incident. Not his engineer, not his press office. The driver himself, on Sky's cameras, standing next to the wreckage of his own afternoon, declined to blame the man who was punished for hitting him. Read those two versions side by side, with the same flat tone they were each delivered in. Nothing Russell said contradicts the steward's facts. It just makes their conclusion very hard to hold. Because when the victim of a collision and the boss of the man who caused it agree with each other, and the only party that disagrees is the panel, you are entitled to ask who the penalty was actually for. And there is a third document from that same Sunday, and it is the quietest one. Lap 8, Kemmel straight, Leclerc and Piastri make contact. A significant touch at high speed between a Ferrari and a McLaren reported by pit debrief among others. No penalty was given. Same race, same steward's room, same afternoon. One contact on lap 1 earns 5 seconds, even with mitigation written into the verdict. One contact on lap 8 earns nothing at all. Now, each of those two calls can be defended on its own. Overlap, racing room, angle of approach, every incident has its own geometry, and I am not pretending they were identical. But put them next to each other and try to write down the standard that produces both outcomes. I could not. And if I cannot, and the drivers cannot, that is a problem bigger than one Sunday in Belgium. So here's your vote, and I want a real answer, not a shrug. If this exact contact happens in reverse, Russell's Mercedes understeering into Hamilton's Ferrari, with the victim calling it a racing incident afterwards, does the penalty still come? Hit like if you think it does, comment if you think it quietly disappears. There is no comfortable answer, which is exactly why I am asking. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is the exact kind of story you will want to be here for when it happens again. Now the mathematics, because 5 seconds sounds like nothing until you convert it. Hamilton served the penalty standing still, before a single mechanic touched the car, during a stop made under the virtual safety car. He finished 4th, 6 seconds behind the podium, after fighting past Piastri in the closing laps, with a car carrying damage from lap 1. Take the 5 seconds back and the gap to 3rd at the flag is 1 second, with 15 laps of racing still to shape it. That penalty did not cost Hamilton momentum or pride. It cost Ferrari a realistic shot at a double podium at a circuit where, by Vasseur's own admission to F1 TV, they did not expect to be strong at all. Vasseur said the team was not expecting this kind of result at Silverstone and Spa because of the track layouts, and they delivered anyway, 2nd for Leclerc and 4th for a wounded Hamilton. That is why "this cost us a lot" was not a throwaway line. He had counted it. There is one more layer, and it is the one that makes this a pattern rather than a bad afternoon. Spa was the 2nd race in a row that ended with a 5-second penalty against Hamilton, after Silverstone 1 week earlier. 2 races, 2 penalties, in a season where, according to Vasseur's own words to the media at Spa, no other lap 1 clash had been penalized at all. We covered the Silverstone weekend on this channel, and at the time it looked like a one-off. It does not look like a one-off anymore. Keep the word pattern in your head, because I am going to be very careful with it in a minute. Why does this keep happening in Formula 1 structurally? Because the stewarding panel is not a fixed court. The names rotate from race to race, and with the names rotate the thresholds. What reads as hard racing to one panel reads as insufficient separation to another. Nobody involved needs to be biased, and I am not saying anyone is. A system where the referee changes every weekend produces inconsistency by design, and the teams have complained about exactly this for years. The individual decision at Spa is a symptom. The rotation is the condition. And a team principal who says out loud that the decision is not his to make is pointing at the condition, not just the symptom. Now the strongest version of the other side because it deserves a fair hearing. The steward's logic is not absurd. Russell earned the overlap. The rules entitle him to racing room, and Hamilton's car, for whatever reason, did not leave enough of it. Outcome matters in stewarding. One driver finished the race, the other finished in the gravel. On that reading, a reduced penalty that acknowledges the mitigation while still assigning responsibility is a reasonable middle path, arguably the exact compromise the system is built to produce. That is a defensible position. It is also not the one that survives the comparison with lap 8, and it is not the one the man in the gravel chose to take. What comes next is the part that decides how you should file this whole story. Before I give it to you, subscribe, because the unsafe release investigation from that same pit stop was still open when the cameras left Spa, and I am covering the outcome the moment it lands. Here is the verdict. What came out of the steward's room at Spa was not really a penalty. It was an admission, written in the panel's own hand, that they punished a driver they simultaneously agreed could barely have avoided the contact. Half the sanction, all of the blame. And around that document, every human voice lined up on the other side. The team principal who called it mega harsh, the punished driver who took responsibility for his weekend everywhere except this corner, and the victim who refused to press charges. So the legitimate question, and I'm going to frame it exactly as far as the facts allow, after 2 penalties in 2 races, in a season where comparable lap 1 contact went unpunished, is Hamilton being measured by a different ruler? Nothing in any written reasoning says so. It is not proven, and I am not going to pretend it is. It is simply a question anyone watching those 2 documents side by side is entitled to ask. Do I know why the lap 8 contact produced silence, while lap 1 produced 5 seconds? No. And that is exactly the problem, because if I cannot tell, and Vasseur cannot tell, and Russell cannot tell, then the standard is not a standard. What is still open, and I want this on the record, the unsafe release case had no published outcome when this was written, and the stewards have offered no side-by-side explanation of the 2 incidents. Until one of those changes, this file stays open. The next Grand Prix weekend is days away, and the drivers sit down with the race director before anyone turns a wheel. Whatever gets said in that room decides whether Spa was a one-off or the start of a very long argument, and you can be sure Vasseur will be asked about it the moment he steps into the paddock. So tell me your verdict, penalty or racing incident? Agree or disagree, the comments are the courtroom, and I will start reading from the top. If this ended up on your screen and you are not subscribed, fix that now, because this story is not over, and when the next domino falls, you will want to be here. Like the video if the lap 8 comparison changed your mind about anything at all. Until the next one.